comes from the book of Luke, chapter 15, verse 11 through 24. And it reads as follows. Then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled themselves with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get a fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. May God add blessing to the reading, hearing, and living of this holy word this day.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. I didn't think about it until a few minutes ago, but I should have got myself some ruby slippers, I guess, to wear. Because all Dorothy had to do was click her heels together of those beautiful ruby red shoes, and she would have been back home in the blink of an eye. It seems as if from the story that is really the only thing that Dorothy wants to do. She wants to go home. And yet, if you remember at the beginning of the movie, she's running away from home. She's discontent with home, and she's especially upset because of the woman who's taken her dog away from her. So she's decided that someplace else, any place else, would be better than home. But when she wakes up in Munchkin Land, the only thing she focuses on from that moment on is trying to get home. Maybe home wasn't so bad after all. But we know from the story that before she can get home, she has to go through some trials and some tests. She must discover who she is. She must come to an understanding of what she really wants, and she must take a journey, and she must travel the yellow brick road. In our scripture reading this morning, which, if you don't remember, is the one we started out with 4 weeks ago, the story that began our sermon series on this travel on the yellow brick road. And it's the story of the discontented prodigal son. Now, the scripture doesn't tell us why he is disgruntled or why he doesn't want to stay at home, why he wants his money ahead of time. There's no explanation, but it seems as if he must think that someplace else, any place else, would be better than being at home. But we also know from the scripture that it isn't long until he's away from home for a while, and he falls on hard times. spends all of his money in frivolous ways. ends up with the pigs deciding that he needs to go home. And so he swallows his pride and he journeys home. And I think he's thinking maybe home wasn't so bad after all. But we know from the story of the prodigal son that in order for him to get home, he had to go through some tests and some trials. He had to discover who he was, and he had to come to an understanding of what he really wanted. He had to take a journey. He had to travel his own yellow brick road. Well, I think the world today is full of folks who would like to be someplace else. Any place else would be better than home. They're not happy at home, or they're not happy with work. They're not happy with what they don't have or what they see others have, and they think that someplace else, any place else, would be better than home. They think that any other work would be better than what they're doing. But oftentimes what happens is that after they spend some time in another job that still doesn't fulfill them, or with another spouse that still doesn't understand them, they decide maybe that home wasn't so bad after all. But we all know that before they can come home, they have to go through some trials and tests. They have to discover who they are. They have to come to an understanding of what they really want, and they have to take a journey. And they too have to travel their own yellow brick road. You see, Dorothy's story, the prodigal son story, and our story are all stories about longing and hoping and dreaming. And they're also all about traveling back home. Because there is in all of these stories a longing, a hoping, a dreaming for something more in our lives. I'm going to take a big step here and say that I think most every person who's ever walked the face of the earth has at some time or another thought, this that is here with me right now is not enough. Certainly there must be more. All of us from one time to another feel like we're not being satisfied with what's going on in our lives, and we seek something else, something different, something more than just what we know of this earthly life. And we may not be able to put it into words, and we may not even realize that we're looking for something more, but it's there. So often this sense of waiting for something more, this something that will feed our spirits and our souls, causes us to look for fulfillment in all the wrong places. We take hold of the wrong things, we go to the wrong places, we develop bad relationships, we spend too much money, we work too much, we buy more than we can use. Did you know that there are more storage units in the United States than there are McDonald's and Starbucks and Walmart stores worldwide combined? 65% of the people who have storage units also have garages. Folks, we're looking for something in things that things can't offer us. We do this all with the faint hope that something will finally satisfy us and silence the spiritual hunger that is within us. So we go through life oftentimes wishing we were someplace else, someone else, any place else, with anyone else would be better than what we have and who we are. But it is only when we come to an understanding of the thing that we are looking for is not available to us if we only think about earthly things, that this home that we love and cherish is only a stopping off place. That there is more to us than worldly goods. Only then are we able to look for our true home, our home that's with God. So Dorothy's story, the prodigal son's story, our story, the world's story is there. It's a journey. But these stories are not really about us. They're really stories stories, the prodigal son and from Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, is that God, I believe, regrets our rebellion but loves us enough to let us go. Dorothy and the prodigal son had to leave the comforts of their home in order to realize what they would miss. And you can be sure that their families worried about them and prayed for them and watched for them to return. I think it is the same for us with God, that when we lose our way, God worries about us, God prays about us, and hopes that we will return. But God does not go on and stop loving us if we choose to rebel. I believe God says, I love you and you are free to go. Make your journey, but I will be here when you return. God allows us to make choices even though God knows what the consequences will be. So we learn first that God regrets our rebellion but loves us and lets us go. And the second thing we learn about God is that God will welcome us back when we return. It's like the prodigal son's father waiting in the road when he saw his son coming back. I want to know, did he wait every day, thinking that this would be the day that his son returned? Why was he in the road that day? I think it might have been that every day he went out and looked, just in case his son was coming home. I believe that he prayed that his son would come home safe. And in the scripture we know that when he sees his son coming down the road, he welcomes him with open arms. But he doesn't just do that. He gives him a party, a big party. And he gives him a new robe, he gives him new sandals, and he puts a ring on his finger. He doesn't just welcome him home, he welcomes him home in a loving and caring and celebratory way. And I believe, because I want to believe that God is waiting right there in the road, always for us, waiting for us to come home. And I believe that we have a God who loves us no matter what, and is standing and waiting to welcome us home with outstretched arms. I think the third thing that we can learn about God from these stories is that God restores us and renews us when we return. Like I said before, the father welcomed the son home, but he didn't just welcome him home and say, okay, whatever it is you've got, that's what you get. But he had the servant bring new stuff, new robes and new sandals and rings for his fingers. And when his father welcomed him home, it was the greatest and most joyous time of all. He had a feast so that his son could eat and fill his stomach so that he could be full again. And I believe that when we get back to God, that God says to us, I'm not going to hold it against you. You're special, I forgive you, and I want to make you new. When Dorothy woke up in Kansas, maybe you remember she was convinced that her experiences had been real. And her Auntie Em and her uncle, they tried to convince her along with the farmhands that everything that she had experienced was a dream. But even if it was a dream, she learned some valuable lessons on her journey. And she said this. She said, well, if I ever go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any farther than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, I never really lost it to begin with. All of us, we all have to do this traveling, this journeying on our own spiritual yellow brick road. We all have to do the searching. We all have to long for the fulfilling presence of God in our lives. And each of us are presented with a choice. We can look for our happiness in the world, or we can look for our happiness that is centered on God. Our lives are a journey. And these life lessons that we learned can only be learned when we travel the yellow brick road. When we make an effort and when we are willing, even, yes, to maybe fail a little bit, but always knowing that we can come home. Because it's actually, I think, the most important part of what we learned from the Wizard of Oz, from the prodigal son.